When Kash Patel walked onto the view, the air shifted. Not the usual hum of polite curiosity. No, this was electric. The kind of pressure you feel right before lightning cracks open the sky. The studio doors parted, and in he strode, calm, steady, unreadable. The co-hosts straightened in their seats like poker players preparing to bluff, raise, or call. Whoopi Goldberg leaned in, face carved from stone. Joy Behar muttered something behind her hand to Lore Wills, who gave a curt nod without breaking eye contact with Patel. This wasn't going to be a chat. This was war and lip gloss and lighting. The producers had loaded the cannons. The hosts came ready to fire. But what they didn't expect. The audience wasn't just watching, they were choosing sides. And they weren't picking who the hosts thought. Kash Patel slid into his chair, no theatrics, no smug grin, just a quiet, unnerving composure. He looked around the table like a lawyer surveying a jury. Let's begin, his silence seemed to say. The opening minutes? Tame enough. Pleasantries with blades hidden beneath. Talk of the FBI. His national security background. Nothing explosive, yet. But the tension coiled tighter with each word, like a spring begging to snap. Then. So, Mr. Patel, Whoopi began, voice smooth but sharp, you've made some interesting comments about media accountability. Some say you're flirting with censorship. So tell us, where's the line? When does free speech become control? Boom. The crowd hushed. 1,000 eyes. Lights bore down. Cameras zoomed in. Patel didn't flinch. Not a twitch. Not a blink. I believe in the First Amendment, he said, his voice measured, like a calm before a courtroom verdict. But freedom doesn't mean license to deceive. Especially when you control the microphone. Low murmur from the crowd. Joy's jaw ticked. Lore's eyes narrowed. But who decides what's deception? Lore pressed, her tone cooling to frost. Because you backed narratives that didn't exactly hold up under pressure. And just like that, the gloves were off. Patel paused. Just long enough for the silence to press in. He turned to Lore. Then to the crowd. That's the conversation we need to have, he said. Not name-calling. Not tribal outrage. Honest, uncomfortable dialogue, like this. Soft ripples of approval from the audience. And in that moment, click, you could feel it. The ground was shifting. Joy leaned forward, eyes flashing. You've defended people who've attacked journalists. That doesn't sound like someone who respects the press. I respect journalism, Patel said, nodding. I just don't respect lies wrapped in credibility. Americans deserve truth, even when it's messy. The murmurs grew louder. The co-hosts were ready for deflection. What they got was control. Steel under silk. But the moment that turned the room? Hadn't even happened yet. That was still coming. And when it did, it would send shockwaves through that stage. Lore adjusted her mic, voice low, almost conspiratorial. Let's talk about your time in the Trump administration, she said. You've taken aim at the media, defended some, let's say, controversial moves. Are you saying you were never part of the distortion machine? The crowd stirred again. Laughter bubbled at the edges. Kash didn't answer immediately. He looked down, at her note card. He knew what was written there. And he knew the trap she was setting. He looked back up. No one should be above accountability, he said. Not me. Not you. Not this show. Not your network. Gasps. Laughter. Applause. Whoopi's brow arched. Her voice dipped. That's a bold accusation. You think this show spreads misinformation? Every outlet has, he said without hesitation. The difference is what you do when the truth finally catches up. Another ripple. Louder. A few claps. One whistle. Joy slammed her palm on the table. Let's be clear, we have standards. We don't peddle conspiracy theories here. Patel cocked his head, just slightly. Still calm. Still cool. Then maybe you're not watching what Americans are seeing, he said. Because a lot of them feel betrayed, not by fake news blogs, but by places they trusted. That hit hard. It wasn't fire. It was precision. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't insult. He just said what a lot of people had been thinking, and said it well. Lore wasn't done. You worked on investigations later deemed politically motivated. Do you regret it? No, he replied. No pause. No apology. Because the facts don't care about politics. And I didn't chase comfort, I chased truth. Whoopi leaned back in her chair. You hear how that sounds, right? She asked, almost amused. Like you're the hero in your own myth. I'm not asking to be the hero, he shot back. I'm just asking for fairness. If public figures get the microscope, and they should, then let's give the media one, too. The room fell silent. Not awkward. Not tense. Just listening. Joy crossed her arms, one last swing loading behind her eyes. So what, now you want journalists punished? I want accountability. Kash Patel's voice rang out, calm, but with a steel edge now. When government misleads the public, there are hearings. Investigations. Consequences. So why should the media, one of the most powerful institutions in this country, get a free pass? And just like that, the room chilled. Lore's eyes narrowed. Her smile, tight. Controlled. But isn't your version of accountability just a backdoor to silencing critics? She asked, voice clipped. You start policing truth, and suddenly, boom, critical voices disappear. Kash leaned in, just slightly. His tone? Still calm. But there was something else now. A flicker. A flare. Only if you think the truth is dangerous. Oof. That line didn't just float, it detonated. A beat. Then another. And then, applause. Soft at first. A few claps. But growing. Like something cracking open. The producers darted their eyes toward the control booth. This wasn't in the rundown. This wasn't the energy they scripted. Whoopi cleared her throat, sharp like a gavel. Let's move on, she said, cutting cleanly. The FBI. You've said you think it's been politicized. You stand by that? Patel didn't blink. Yes. Parts of it, absolutely. And that should terrify everyone, right, left, center. The agency's job is to serve the Constitution. Not a party platform. And that's when it started. The pivot. Not because he said something wild, but because the audience started nodding. Clapping. Agreeing. The vibe shifted. And the hosts felt it. They weren't just interviewing a guest anymore. They were losing the room. And Patel? He felt it too. And that's when the change came. Until now, he'd been playing defense. Careful. Measured. Now? He leaned forward. And struck back. Lore's voice cut in, sharper than before. Let me ask this directly, are you accusing us, this show, of being part of the misinformation problem? Patel looked at her. No smirk. Just truth, delivered like a scalpel. I'm saying this show reflects a bigger issue. When the narrative fits your politics, it airs. When it doesn't, it gets dismissed, or mocked. You could almost hear the camera crew shifting. Whoopi folded her arms, her gaze sharpening. That's not true. We've had Republicans on. Yes, he nodded. And how were they treated? Ripples through the crowd. A few surprised laughs. A soft from the back row. Joy jumped in, voice hot now. You come in here and act like you're the victim, when you worked for a man who attacked journalists daily. I'm not a victim, he replied coolly. But I am saying what millions think, trust in the media is broken. And it didn't shatter on its own. Boom. That wasn't a talking point. That was a hammer. Now it was hot. Really hot. Whoopi tried to pivot again. Let's go back to the FBI. You said there's corruption. That's a huge accusation. You have proof? Yes. No hesitation. Whistleblower testimony. Leaked memos. Congressional investigations. It's all public. This isn't speculation, it's documented. Lore pounced. But you're politicizing it now. You're on a political talk show making accusations without evidence. Cash reached into his jacket. And then, he pulled out the paper. Folded. Precise. Held it up. I brought evidence. I wasn't asked about it. I was asked about my loyalty, my character, my past. Not facts. He set it down. Here's a list. Retracted headlines. Discredited stories. False claims aired nationally, and never corrected. Right here. On this network. Dead silence. You could hear a pen drop. Joy's eyes narrowed. Her voice, incredulous. You're doing this for a viral clip. I'm doing this, he said, slow and steady, because for years I've been called dangerous. Dishonest. Extreme. And now I have 5 minutes to speak, and that's the takeaway? It landed like a gut punch. Even Whoopi leaned back. Just for a second. Cash slid the paper forward, slow and deliberate. You don't have to read it now. But I hope you will. And I hope viewers will ask, why do all these mistakes always favor one side? A beat. Then. Clapping. Real clapping. Stronger this time. Sustained. Audible. Joy blinked. Lore looked down at her notes. The power in the room had shifted. It wasn't the host steering anymore. It was him. The audience could feel it. And then? Whoopi tried to snap it back. You've made your point, she said, voice tighter now. But this isn't a courtroom. It's a talk show. Cash gave the faintest smile. A knowing one. Then let's talk. Honestly. No scripts. Just real questions. Real answers. Laughter. Applause. That's right, from somewhere in the crowd. Joy scrambled to regain ground. Fine. Let's talk. You worked with people who attacked journalists. Who pushed falsehoods. Who downplayed the press. How do you justify that? You're talking about politics, he said, I'm talking about trust. There's a difference. Lore cut in. But you were part of the machine. Don't deny it. Patel leaned forward again. His tone? Controlled. Centered. But with fire under the surface. I worked in government. Not spin. I chased evidence. Not applause. Then. He turned. Straight to Whoopi. And said. Let me ask you something. The entire studio leaned in. The audience? Locked in. Whoopi? Caught just slightly off guard. A flicker of surprise. Her lips parted, ready to deflect, but the question was coming. And it wasn't the one anyone expected. The air thickened. You could feel it. The vibe had shifted, again. This time, it wasn't just uncomfortable. It was loaded. Like the silence before something irreversible. Cash had asked the question. And now, it was Whoopi under the spotlight. She blinked. Paused. All right, she said cautiously. Go on. Patel didn't waste a second. Over the last 5 years, he began, voice measured but firm, how often has this show corrected itself? I mean, without backlash, no pressure, no outrage, just voluntarily corrected a false claim made by a guest or a host. And there it was. The strike that hit bone. Whoopi's eyes flicked to the producers. Silence in her earpiece. No rescue line. Just her. On live TV. Joy tried to wedge herself in. This isn't about us right now. But Cash stayed steady, unbothered. Of course it is. Millions tune into what's said at this table. If you're going to demand transparency from others, it starts with owning your own voice. The audience reacted. Not loudly, but noticeably. For a moment, no one spoke. Not even the hosts. Not even to deflect. That pause? 5 seconds? 6? Felt like a lifetime. Whoopi finally broke the silence, slower now. Fair question, she admitted. I honestly don't know. Cash gave a small nod. That's enough for me. And this time, the applause wasn't hesitant. It was solid. Earned. Real. The show, usually in full control of its tempo, now felt like it was being carried by something else, him. Laura leaned forward, trying to get a grip on the narrative again. But you're holding us to journalism standards, she pointed out, when we're commentators. We share opinions, not headlines. And opinions matter, he said plainly. Especially when they're delivered with the weight of authority. On a platform like this, opinions don't just echo, they shape reality. He wasn't performing. He wasn't provoking. He was exposing something raw, and they didn't expect it. The mood shifted again, not into hostility, but into something quieter. A realization. This wasn't the ambush they thought it would be. Not for him. But it might be for them. Then Joy leaned in, voice tightening. Let's flip the script, then. You want accountability, what about you? Any regrets? Any moments you'd take back if you had the chance? She wasn't fishing for reflection. She was hunting for weakness. Cash didn't flinch. I regret how easily truth gets buried, he replied. Not that I've tried to dig it back up. Whoopi's eyes narrowed slightly. That sounds practiced. Maybe, he said. But it's still true. And sometimes the truth only stings because it's real. Lore wasn't backing down. But you've made serious accusations about our institutions, our media. Isn't that part of the division you say you're fighting? Now the tone sharpened. Less debate, more cross-examination. What divides us, he said clearly, is when one side is allowed to question everything, and the other side is shamed into silence. The room reacted again. Stirring. Uneasy. The truth of it hung there, undeniable. Joy leaned in. So, what, you're the martyr now? No, he said. I'm just someone with a message. You can come after me all day, that won't change the facts. Applause again. Stronger this time. You could feel it, the audience wasn't reacting to Patel anymore. They were reacting with him. Whoopi's voice dropped. Okay, let's step off the notes. I've got a question that's not in your prep. Cash met her gaze. Go for it. You say you care about trust. But you worked for an administration that, let's be honest, lied. Constantly. How do you distance yourself from that? His response was immediate. Unapologetic. Because I didn't serve a man. I served the Constitution. And I followed facts, wherever they led. Even when they made my own side uncomfortable. She waited for a crack. There wasn't one. He wasn't defending his resume. He was defending principle. Lore switched approach. So what's your goal here, Cash? You've called us out, defended yourself. Are we supposed to believe you're the good guy? That we're the villains? He shook his head. No. I want people to leave here thinking. That's it. Think critically. About what they're told. About who controls the story. About who benefits from their trust. A pause. He let the silence breathe. I'm not asking people to take my word for it. I'm asking them to question everybody, including me. That hit deep. The applause wasn't just louder now. It wasn't just hands clapping. It was people standing. Not everyone. But enough. Enough to rattle the table. Enough to be seen. Joy's jaw tensed. Lore checked her notes. Whoopi watched it unfold. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Finally, Whoopi exhaled with a crooked smile. You know what? You're good. I'll give you that. Cash's reply came without hesitation. I'm not here to be good. I'm here to be honest. That was it. The line. The one already being clipped by interns backstage. The one headed straight for trending tabs and timelines. But the show wasn't over. And the next topic? Was going to get even hotter. Whoopi eased into it slowly. You talk about service. The Constitution. You say you love this country. Her tone sharpened. So let me ask you, what does patriotism mean to you? Cash paused. Not because he was unsure, but because he knew the weight of what was coming. He let the moment settle. To me, he said finally, patriotism means speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when your side doesn't want to hear it. Even when it costs you. Joy cut in. Even if that means defending things most Americans find indefensible? But whose country are you standing up for? Joy's voice cut through the air, sharp. Because a lot of people out there don't see your version of America as their own. Cash didn't flinch. He looked straight at her. I'm standing up for all of it, he said. Not red America. Not blue America. Not for whichever tribe screams loudest. For the whole messy, complicated, incredible experiment we're all still living in. It should have sounded too perfect. But somehow, it didn't. It felt real. Earned. Lore wasn't buying it. But don't you think some of the things you've supported, the rhetoric, the narratives, have hurt people? Made some feel like they're not included in that version of America? Cash didn't blink. I think pretending the truth doesn't matter hurts more. Now the audience wasn't clapping. They weren't booing. They were just watching. Fully. Intently. No blinking. No shifting. You can't call yourself a patriot, Joy said suddenly, her voice sharpening again, and tear down the very institutions that make this country work. Cash turned to her, calm but direct. That's the difference between being loyal and being obedient, he said. I believe in our institutions enough to want to fix them. You believe in them enough to look the other way when they're broken. That line cracked open the room. Gasps. Soft voices. A rustle of surprise. Then, applause, unexpected and uncoordinated. But he wasn't stopping there. You want to talk about patriotism, he said, voice rising, not angry, but forceful. Patriotism isn't about a bumper sticker or a flag on your lawn. It's about having the guts to say, we are capable of better. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. This wasn't debate anymore. It was confrontation. With the mirror. Whoopi leaned in. So who decides what better looks like, she asked, her tone lower now. Measured. Cautious. The people, Cash replied. Not the pundits. Not the politicians. Not the people behind this desk. The ones who wake up early, go to work, pay their taxes, and feel invisible every time they turn on the TV. And then? A voice from the crowd. A woman in a denim jacket. Not a plant. Not a staffer. Just a person who stood up quietly and said. Finally. Someone saying it. No shouting. No drama. Just 5 words that cut through everything else. The room froze again. Joy looked stunned. Lore looked down. Whoopi didn't say a word. Because that moment? That unscripted second? Said more than any argument ever could. The segment had shifted. It wasn't about Cash Patel anymore. It was about everyone who felt unheard until now. And somehow, he had pulled the silence open wide. But it wasn't over. Because now, the final topic hovered in the air. Power. And who actually holds it? This time, the audience didn't applaud. They just leaned in. Joy spoke first, but the heat was gone from her voice. So what are you saying? That we're the bad guys now? Cash didn't dodge. I'm saying that power doesn't always wear a title, he said. Sometimes it just holds a microphone. Chairs creaked as people shifted. Lore folded her arms. We're not elected officials. We don't write laws. No, he said. But you shape perception. And sometimes, that's even more powerful than policy. Whoopi shook her head, skeptical. So now we're responsible for how everyone feels? Not how they feel, he said. But for what you put out into the world. Just like I am. The only difference is, when I mess up, there's an investigation. When the media gets it wrong, it's on to the next segment by tomorrow. No one clapped. But no one looked away, either. Joy tried to pivot. Let's be honest. You've shaped public opinion too. You're not some outsider to the system. I never said I was, he replied. But I've seen how it works. From the inside. And I've seen how it gets twisted, on both sides. Laura leaned forward again. So why come here? You knew how this would go. Because people deserve to hear something that wasn't cleared by a PR department, he said, gesturing around him. This room? This table? It's where people form opinions, about leaders, about truth, about reality. So yeah, I came here. Because this matters. And then he turned it. But let me flip it back. The tension snapped into place. Whoopi gave a small nod. Go ahead. Cash looked at each of them. You've asked me about my loyalties, my decisions, my missteps. So here's mine for you. What's your responsibility, to your audience, when you know something's false, but it fits the narrative? Do you say it anyway? Or do you stay quiet? He didn't raise his voice. Didn't add sting. He just asked. And that's what made it hit even harder. Joy opened her mouth, but stopped. Lore looked at Whoopi. Whoopi looked out at the crowd. And for just a moment, everything was still. Because there wasn't a soundbite answer. There wasn't a rehearsed pivot. There was just the question. The real question. Who gets to shape the story? And who answers when that story is wrong? Cash didn't press. He didn't gloat. He just let it hang in the air. I'm not saying you're bad people, he added. But you have power. And power without self-examination? Becomes control. The line dropped like stone into water. Even the camera crew moved more slowly now. Everyone felt it. No one had expected this. Not from this guest. Not on this show. But it was happening. Live. And the audience? They knew it. They felt it. Because this wasn't their story anymore. It was his. And yet, the most explosive topic was still on the table. The politics inside the media itself. The elephant in the room. The conversation everyone danced around but rarely said out loud. Now? They had no choice. And Joy, trying to tread carefully, finally asked. So, are you saying this is all political? All right, Joy said, her tone cautious now, since we're talking about power, perception, and all that, let's get into politics. You've accused the media of being biased. So tell me plainly, do you think this show pushes a political agenda? Cash didn't blink. Yes. Just one word. Delivered clean, cold, without hesitation. It landed like a gavel. Joy blinked. That's it? No qualifiers? Nope, he said. That's it. No qualifiers needed. Lore jumped in. So just because we express progressive views, you automatically label us biased? He shook his head. No. I say you're biased because facts here often pass through a political lens before they reach your viewers. That's the difference between honest perspective and narrative shaping. Whoopi leaned forward, ready to pounce. We respond to what we see. Dangerous rhetoric, disinformation, threats to democracy, we don't sugarcoat it. And we won't pretend both sides are equally responsible when they're not. I'm not asking you to pretend, Cash said, still composed. I'm asking you to be consistent. If you're going to hold one party accountable for its lies, hold your own side to the same fire when it spreads them too. That was it. The moment they hoped wouldn't happen. The one they'd tried to keep vague. Now it was out in the open. Unvarnished. On air. Joy wasn't backing down. Then give us one example. Cash didn't flinch. The Hunter Biden laptop story. He paused for effect. It was labeled foreign propaganda. Discredited by headlines. Erased by platforms. And this show, like many others, never acknowledged it when the facts came out. A visible ripple passed through the studio. Not applause. Not outrage. Just tension. Because people remembered. And silence said more than denial. Lord jumped in. That story wasn't verified at the time. There were reasons to question it. No, he countered. It was inconvenient at the time. And that's the difference. Truth isn't supposed to depend on the timing, or who it helps. Whoopi narrowed her eyes. So now you're saying we buried it? I'm saying the media ecosystem punished anyone who even questioned the narrative, he replied. And when that narrative fell apart, nobody answered for it. Joy's voice rose slightly. So what, you want a live apology? On air? Cash shook his head, calm as ever. No. I want transparency. I want audiences to hear both sides. To be trusted with the truth, even if it's messy. Even if it doesn't serve someone's politics. He paused. That's not partisan. That's just freedom. And the crowd, finally, responded. Loud. Clear. Genuine. This wasn't applause for show. This was a reaction that bypassed politeness. Whoopi leaned back, arms crossed, analyzing him now. Because she knew something had just shifted. The audience had connected to him, not them. Patel's voice softened. The press should be a mirror, he said. Not a filter. When it starts deciding what the public gets to see, it stops informing. It starts influencing. Another pulse through the crowd. Not loud, but deep. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about trust. And out in living rooms across America, people were asking themselves the one question no host could frame. Have I only been told what someone wanted me to believe? The studio was still live. But the atmosphere had changed. It wasn't just a talk show now. It felt like a reckoning. Whoopi broke the silence, voice steadier but far more subdued. You've said your piece. The media's flawed. We're flawed. So now what? What's the solution, then? Cash glanced around the table. Conversation, he said. Not spin. Not curated panels. Honest, uncomfortable, face-to-face conversation, like this. He let that settle. I don't hate the press. I don't want to silence it. I just want it to live up to what it claims to be. Laura leaned in again, skeptical. But let's be real, most of what you've said today will be clipped, twisted, taken out of context. That's how this works. He nodded, knowingly. Probably. But the audience isn't stupid. They know. They're tired of being managed, framed, fed. They want real voices, even if they don't agree with them. Then he turned to the camera, directly. I'm not here to tell people what to think. I'm here to remind them they're allowed to. That was it. The quote. The soundbite. The one that would hit headlines, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, everywhere. They're allowed to. The hosts didn't say a word. Joy lowered her eyes to her cards, then slid them aside. Laura leaned back. Whoopi glanced offstage. Even they felt it. The shift. The loss of control. But Cash wasn't done. You asked earlier if I regret anything. I don't regret defending what I believe. Even when it cost me. He paused. The air held tight. But I do regret how many people feel they have to stay quiet, just to avoid being labeled or cancelled. That's not democracy. That's control, dressed in civility. The crowd erupted again. Bigger. Stronger. More than before. Not applause for a guest. Recognition of something real. Joy tried to salvage something. You don't think shows like this try to make space for different opinions? He looked at her, steady. I think you give space to people you already agree with. I think real disagreement makes people nervous, until today. That landed. Not like a bomb. Like a truth. One they didn't want to admit. But couldn't deny. Whoopi let out a slow breath. So what now? We just agree to disagree? Cash gave a small smile. No. We learn to listen. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. The segment was nearly over. The music was about to roll. The credits were cueing. But no one at the table moved quite the same anymore. Because something had broken open. And when the closing theme began, when the cameras pulled wide, when the studio lights softened, Cash Patel turned to the hosts one last time. Thanks for having me. And he meant it. They knew it. And that? Might have been the hardest truth of all. Whether you loved him or couldn't stand him, Cash Patel hadn't come to burn it down. He came to rattle the frame. And he did. But the most unforgettable moment? It wasn't on air. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't even planned. It happened after the cameras cut. The show ended precisely on time. The outro music played. The signature logo rolled across the screen. The applause sign blinked automatically. And the audience clapped. But not the usual way. Not out of politeness. Not because they were told. It was slower. Heavier. Reflective. The kind of applause people give when they're still trying to decide how they feel, because something just challenged what they thought they knew. The host stood first. Grabbing cue cards. Straightening papers. Avoiding each other's glances like strangers who'd just ridden through a storm together. Cash didn't move. Not right away. He remained in his seat, still, centered, unrushed. Because he hadn't come to win a moment. He'd come to plant one. And he had. When he finally stood, he didn't look at the hosts. He turned toward the crowd. A quiet nod. That was all. But it landed like a signature at the end of a statement. Then, off to the side, something shifted. A crew member leaned into a producer's ear. A whisper. A quick point. The producer's eyes snapped to the studio floor. Not at the hosts. At the audience. Because something rare was happening. People were coming down from the seats. Quietly. Calmly. With intention. Not to argue. Not to chant. Just to speak. One by one at first. Then in clusters. A line began forming near the stage. They came not for autographs. But for something simpler, and far more unusual. To shake the hand of someone they'd been told not to trust. To say something quietly. To offer eye contact. Gratitude. Disagreement. Curiosity. Joy saw it first. She froze, watching as Moore stepped forward. Whoopi glanced over her shoulder. Lore didn't speak. But her arms, once crossed, dropped just slightly as her eyes followed the scene. One woman in the front row reached out and touched Cash's arm. I don't agree with all of it, she said gently. But thank you, for saying what no one else will. Cash nodded. No cameras. No fanfare. Just acknowledgement between two people who didn't have to agree to understand each other. Backstage, a PA turned to the floor manager. Should we cut the feed on the behind-the-scenes camera? A beat. Then. No. Let it roll. Because this wasn't about segments anymore. This was something else. Something real. A producer finally walked over to Patel, still lingering near the stage. You stirred something, she said. That doesn't happen often in here. He smiled, just a little. That was the goal. A few minutes later, the hosts re-emerged, off-camera, off-script. Whoopi passed by without a word. Lore gave a faint, respectful nod. Joy didn't speak, just glanced briefly, then looked away. She wasn't furious. She wasn't flustered. She looked tired. Like someone still working through what just happened. No one said it. But every person in the building felt it. This wasn't just another guest. This was a moment that wouldn't fade when the lights did. Because it wasn't about applause. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't even about the politics. It was about airing something unsaid. Reclaiming space, for questions, for nuance, for people who don't fit neatly into a headline or hashtag. And by the time Cash Patel walked out of that studio and into the sunlight, the internet was already buzzing. Clips spreading. Hashtags climbing. Arguments igniting. But the most powerful moment? It never aired. And it didn't have to. Because the truth, whatever your version of it, isn't always loud. Sometimes, it just lingers. It stirs. It stays. And the next time the lights go up, and a new guest walks on stage, and the applause light flashes on. Some in the audience will remember the moment it didn't go according to script. And they'll wonder. What if this one's unfiltered, too? What if this one challenges the frame instead of playing to it? And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what they're hoping for.